Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to the throne room. We're going to give everybody a chance to get into the room. Let's do our liking and our sharing, our liking and our sharing. Let's see. Okay. All right, we got everything flowing. Everything's flowing. So everybody, welcome back into the throne room. I know y'all was waiting to see our brother and our friend Ned. Y'all keep him in your prayers and keep his family in your prayers. But today we have an awesome opportunity and we have created this space. As always, you know that this space has been created for us to be able to purge from our issues, heal from our wounds, and find rest so that we can transform into that which we have been called and created to become. And you all know what that is. That is royalty. Thank you for joining us. Today, our space has been really created as a space to breathe. It's just a space to breathe. There's really no other profound statement other than there's a whole lot of ish going on in the world. There's a whole lot of stuff happening.
One
And
more thing on our plates.
yeah, it's been a lot. And so today we're gonna just have a moment. We're gonna make our space a moment whereby we're gonna come together and try to process some of what we've all been feeling as I've scrolled through Facebook and I've gotten text messages and I've reached out to family and friends. Just hearing some of the internal battles and the tears and the cries and from all of the things that have been transpiring, I just think that we all just need a breath. Right. And so today, joining me back here in this space where we're going to get a chance to breathe is the one and the only. You know who she is, Mother. She's in the building with us today. We thank God for her life and for her wisdom that she shares with us during these times. And as always, we thank all of you guys who are listening and tuning in. Drop your comments and your name in the chat so we can give you a shout out. But our special, very special guest, y'all, I just want you to know I've been trying to get Caitlin on this podcast for like a year. I want y'all to know that it's been some time. She is the bomb.com. She's going to tell you a little bit about herself. But let me tell you, when I was living in New Jersey and there were moments where I need to get my life all the way together, homegirl, like she is a blessing. She had helped get me all centered and get me all the way together. And I thought, what perfect person would there be than to have her be able to take a moment to be able to share with us some wisdom about how we're going to deal with our mental wellness in this state, right? How do we get ourselves back to a place of balance? Even to ask the question, can we become balanced in this moment? And is it okay for us to feel all of these crazy feelings that we've been feeling as we've been listening to the media just broadcast all of these horrific events? And so I'm glad and I'm honored and I'm so happy that God answered my prayer this afternoon when I text her all late in the day. And I know she's like, oh my God, this last minute situation here. But I am so grateful for your ability to attend our show today. So, y'all, give a hearty, warm welcome to our friend of the show, Caitlin, who's
Again, Caitlin.
yes, yay. We're so excited to have you here. Caitlin, introduce yourself. Tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here and really flattered by that feedback. That's I'm so glad to know that I was able to support you in that way. That was so
Yeah.
impactful. That's what I do. That's what I aspire to do. I strive to do,
Mm.
and I try to do that in multiple capacities. So my first and longest kind of identity, I guess you could say, professionally, especially, is in mental health. I've been in the field of mental health for almost 15 years now, which is crazy to say.
Mm.
I
Great.
currently supervise a partial care program, which is like an intensive group therapy program for teens and adolescents. I've
Mm.
been doing that for almost 6 years at that particular program. I'm also a spiritual healer, so I am a Reiki practitioner and also a yoga instructor, trained yoga instructor. And I also am a community organizer. So I also oversee an organization in Trenton that does resident led community organizing directly in the community. And I try to center a lot of that work around the healing power
Mm.
of community and communal relations. So to me, everything that I do, and I think the way that I look at everything, um, comes from a place of healing and circles back to a place of healing. So that's
Mm.
always how I try to frame everything that I'm involved with, anything that I'm working on. All is centered around healing and how to promote that both within myself and with any people or group or capacity that I'm working in or with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, first, we want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing, especially in the New Jersey, that state house area. There's a lot of needs there. And so we thank you first and foremost. We give a shout out to Abby. Hey, girl, thank you for tuning back in with us this week. And let's just talk. Like, let's give this space and opportunity. To be able to give us some type of life, right? Some type of breath. So yesterday, and this is kind of what really tipped the icing for me. It was like yesterday, I'm just scrolling through, and then I see this thing pop up on my screen, like it's this urgent message. Something's going down in a school, elementary school in Texas, and I'm like, what's happening at the elementary school? And it's like a mass shooting. And as time progressed, I saw that there were like 19 babies who really lost their lives. And I just, you know, among that and some other devastating news that I got from a close friend and some other friends who were just battling some things, I think that I just felt like there's a need here. There's a need to give voice to some of the things that are happening around us. And I hear a lot of questions, and sometimes I don't know what to say to them. I don't even know what to do with the feelings that I feel. I don't know if it's okay for me as someone who would be considered influential. Is it okay for me to be able to express my anger towards where we are, right? And what it is that's going on around us. So I'm throwing that out there because I want us to know that this is a space for us to be transparent. We take the covers off. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to deal with real world and real life issues so that we can essentially heal from those things. And so, if any of our listeners, hey Ned, we love you. We're
Yeah.
glad that you're here. You are in our prayers. Hey, Brother Brown, welcome to the show. Thank you for returning. But if anybody has anything on their heart
What's
or their
on your
mind,
mind?
drop it. Drop it. We want to hear from you. So I'm just throwing it out there. That
You
those
know
were my
why?
feelings.
Because you know what the first thing is we have to put it out there.
Yeah.
We have to put it out there, name it, so that we can start to deal with it. And it's not about evaluation, being evaluated by anything else. It's just putting it out there because it's just one more thing that we know that needs to be addressed. That is not being compounded and
Yeah.
put under the covers to be able to come up because it's like a seed being planted. It's like,
Yeah.
and we don't want to give it life, any more life than it already has. We want to start to deal with it from another perspective.
Yeah. So Caitlin, as we talk about like this community piece, and communities are being impacted by all these events all over the world, right? How has things been, I guess, or what would you say to our communities at this present moment with all of the mayhem that's happening?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, right? Because, like you said, there's this struggle to know what to say because
Yeah.
what do you say, right? These
Yeah.
things are kind of these unspeakable events and actions that don't really have words, because usually when we are looking to say something, right, we're looking to accomplish a handful of things. That could either
Yeah.
be to justify something, which in situations like this is not a possibility, right? There is no
Right.
justification for an event like this, or like any of
Yeah.
the recent events, or even any of the many of the historical events, right, that we have
Right.
dealing with in recent history. Um, Another purpose of saying something could be to offer comfort or sympathy, right? But when
Mm.
we ourselves are experiencing the grief or the pain or the rage that these kinds of events cause, it's very difficult to extend comfort and sympathy
Mhm.
to somebody else, right?
Right.
Because we're requiring that energy to hold that space for ourselves also, right? And
Yeah.
we're not feeling comforted, or we're not feeling, like there is sympathy to be found or extended. That's difficult to offer somebody else, right? And may seem
Right.
like pacification. It's not enough.
It's
Um,
a security
yeah,
that we're exhibiting.
Yeah.
right, exactly. Like you're just looking for a thing to say,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I think it's okay to acknowledge that there is not a thing to be said, right?
Mm.
Um,
Right.
and just we can acknowledge that internally to ourselves, right?
Mm.
And we can acknowledge that to other people. Like I'm just having a really hard time.
Mhm.
It's interesting. So I'm in a group chat with a bunch of my sorority sisters and friends of mine. And somebody brought this to the group chat yesterday. Um, and it was just kind of a statement like, this happened, right?
Yeah.
And somebody else responded essentially like, I don't even have the
Mm.
capacity to process this. I
Yeah.
don't even know how to process this. And then there was just kind of an echoing of that, right? From everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't either. Yeah, me neither. Like, and it was just, and that in and of itself, that recognition, that acknowledgement
Mhm.
that this thing
This
happened,
can be comforting.
right? Yeah. And we're
Yeah.
all
Mhm.
struggling to
Mhm.
process this or find words for this or even think about it, right? Like we don't even
Mm.
have the room to think about it. We were just grieving something else last week, right? And we're not
Mhm.
done with that yet. And now we have this whole other thing that we're being forced to grieve and feel and experience,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
so sometimes just that acknowledgement of I don't have the space, and then that communal recognition of other people who feel similarly, right? There's a healing property in that, in being amongst other folks who are
Mm.
having a similar experience, right?
Right.
And so that's one thing, right? Like just holding, like you were doing with this conversation, right? Holding
Yeah.
space, and just, even if we just all sat here for an
For
hour
s
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
just were together and crying or just sitting in silence,
Yes.
but this is where we
Yeah.
needed to be together,
Yes.
that's
Mhm.
okay to hold space for that, right? And I think
Mhm.
Yeah.
sometimes um one of the things that we are inclined to do in these moments as humans, because psychologically we are wired this way, right, is to try
Mhm.
to figure is try to make sense of things,
We're
Mhm.
curious. Yeah.
rationale in things, right? Like we are literally our
Put some
brain
logic to it.
Yes.
to try to find the logic, to try to find
Yes.
that it makes. And
Always.
a lot of times in situations like the ones that have occurred recently with Buffalo, and then with this most recent school shooting, and with the attack in California, we try to find this logic, and that actually causes our nervous system more distress because there is no logic to be found, right? There is no rational line of thinking that would lead a person who is not in a state of total crisis or upheaval in their own nervous system to be able to follow a line of thinking and say, yes, I can logically see why someone would do this, right? We
Right.
are so desperate psychologically, mentally, to find that thread of rationale that we're trying to look for the person to blame for it, look for the thing to blame for bringing somebody to this point, right? And we are grasping at straws when it comes to that. And it actually causes us more distress because we never
Mm.
find the thing, right? We never find
Right.
the thing that actually makes it make sense, right? And
Yeah.
so we're left in this state of distress because we are challenging our brain to find sense where there is none to be found, right? And so
Mm.
sometimes just taking the moment to say, I recognize that this is completely nonsensical. There is
Yeah.
no rationale, there is no logic to be found in this. It is just devastating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's it. And to just sit with that for as long as you need to, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we're always looking for the next thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's important. There is a need for action to happen, but it
Right.
cannot happen at the expense of allowing ourselves the space to move through the very big emotions that things like this can bring us, because then that just gets stuck up in us.
Right.
Yeah, that's
It
what's up.
doesn't it doesn't go and it doesn't leave.
That's the seed being planted, and we
Yeah.
bury it and misplace blame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we become perpetrators of something too, because it festers in us.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
it's that ripple effect into community because we're not dealing with it. And I would add this. It would be one thing to say that these incidents were the only things that are happening in our lives.
Right.
Kaylin, if that was the end of it, it would be okay. But we have the personal things, the local community things that we are dealing with, economic things, things
Yes.
that are happening in our personal lives and our personal relationships that are also happening. Like, this didn't happen before. Why am I feeling this way? And all of this newness. And we're still dealing with the COVID, the residual effects of COVID and monkeypox. And all of these things are continuously coming up, compounding it. And so
Yeah.
what do? I can't make sense of all of
My
this.
mind can't take it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where that space comes in, right? And all of that, right? Like you're saying, Deborah, compounded by the fact that we live in a hyper productive society, right? And
Mhm.
we have been conditioned to attach our value to how productive we are, how much we contribute, right? In this capitalist, this late stage
Mhm.
capitalist society, we have been it's been hammered into us that we are
Mhm.
intended to just go, 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 to do all
Yeah.
the things, to make all the money, to get all the achievements, to contribute to somebody else's pockets,
And
right?
their expectations, live up to the expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Someone's expectation.
Somebody put it out there.
You know,
Whoever said
the
it.
whole thing, right? That nobody even knows whose expectations these are. We've just been fed these standards, right? That
Right.
don't stop to think about where they're coming from or why they are what they are, right? Because we don't have time. We have
Right.
to go to the grocery store and we have to feed the kids and we have to pick them up from school and then we have to go to work and then we have to work overtime and then we have to work on the weekends and then we have to do
Mm.
all these things, right? And go, 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 because my job is putting all this pressure on me. And there is a revolution in refusal.
Wow.
Mm.
There is a revolution in
To
refusing
know.
to feed into that, right?
Right.
continually just go along with that and saying, I'm taking a moment to pause.
Yeah.
I'm taking a moment to pause because it's too much. All of it is
I can
too
say
much.
that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So Ned said society is so numb that it's hard to process these trauma moments. Yeah. Um,
The desensitizing of it all.
Yeah, yeah. So, shout out to Calvin again and our sister Vanessa for watching and tuning in with us. Caitlin, you made a statement about us being able to, sit in the moment, right? And to be able to not have to do anything, right? Having these moments whereby we can just, as I call it, take a breath. But I think that Mom, you use the word desensitization, right? I think that we haven't learned how to sit with our emotions. Like it becomes an uncomfortable thing. How do we begin this process of sitting with our emotions?
Yeah, that's a great, 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 great question, Monica. And this is something that um, I talk about a lot um, in my mental health work, especially with our kids, because kids
Yeah.
already have a decreased ability to sit with emotion and experience emotion, right? Because their
Hmm.
prefrontal cortexes,
Yeah.
biologically wise, right, are not developed, so they have
Hmm.
less ability to filter out those difficult
Reason.
emotions
Hmm.
and manage them, right? They just kind of come out.
Yeah.
But we are also not taught that, right? Like as adults, we never got a class on how to process emotions. And if we came from an emotionally stunted or emotionally toxic or um, uh, emotionally unavailable household and it was
Hmm.
not modeled for us, we're going to have an even more difficult time, right? Because
Right.
a lot of us rely on that childhood experience in our homes to
Take that.
learn how to do a lot of
Hmm.
personal and interpersonal processes, right? And if we come from a
Yeah.
house where we did not have that experience, where we didn't have anybody who was either modeling that for us in their own actions and behavior or who was actively teaching us that, then we're
Right.
dysfunctional adults, period. Right. And
Right.
I say that's a good majority of adults, myself included. I spent a long time and still have a lot of dysfunctional things that I am actively working to unlearn and relearn anew. Right. But I would say
Yeah.
the majority of American adults are emotionally dysfunctional to some level, some
Mm.
capacity, right? Because we were just not taught this.
Right.
Um, and so there's an actual practice. And if you have not read My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, it's
Mm.
a book about somatic abolitionism, which talks a lot about how racial trauma lives in the bodies of people, including
Hmm.
white bodies and black bodies, differently.
Hmm.
And it has exercises in the book for you to both recognize ways that you're impacted by that trauma and also ways to move through and process that trauma. And he has an activity in there which is a container activity, which is something that is used often in various different mental health capacities and approaches, where essentially we have a theoretical kind of like uh, energetic body container that
Right.
allows us to hold a certain amount of emotion, right? Whether that's, and typically we're talking about distressing emotion, but it can also be
Positive.
positive
Right.
emotion for
Hmm.
sure. But we all have kind of this like energetic container, right? That has a certain capacity to hold a certain amount of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And most of us, our container is like a little like pill bottle, right? Like
Yes,
Right.
little
really.
tiny thing because we have not practiced how to expand that,
Hmm.
right? And so this container practice, it is a way that you can learn how to take that container and expand it gradually so that you're able to hold more space for more stuff and move through it as opposed to hold on to it, right? Because what tends to happen is when we have these little tiny energetic containers, we stuff all this stuff in it and then it never goes anywhere. And then we explode, right? In one
Right.
way or another. Whether,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
so Caitlin, and just know that I do this often. That our language sometimes is far removed from the places that are really in need of this, and because we have expertise or are considered SMEs, we tend to do high level talk. So when we're talking about these energy in containers and these things that we're talking about, is there a way that you can give it in a form that gives a
An
real
example of how it
example of,
works
yeah, like how do we do that? Give us an example of when a person would be able to use this, or a scenario of
or
some
how it will
sort.
be used.
Yeah.
So, let me think of a specific example that would be helpful for kind of like modeling this. So,
Yes.
typically, what you would want to do, and you want to think about this like it's a sport, right? Like when
Mhm.
you first start playing a sport, you're probably not on varsity, right?
Right.
And that's the same thing with any type of energetic or mental health or mindful practice that you do. It is something, it's a practice and it's
Mhm.
something that you build, right? So
Good.
when you first start, you're not going to start when the Buffalo shooting happened and think
Right.
you're going to be able to do this, right? Because that's way too big, right?
Right.
So you want to, road rage is a really good way, depending on your level of road rage maybe,
Right.
but like those kind of minor annoyances, and even sometimes depending on where you're starting from, when you're not experiencing any type of distressing emotion, can be a good
Right.
place to start, right? And as a yoga practitioner, the way that my preferred method of doing this is through breath and the awareness of breath.
Mhm.
But there are lots of other ways that you can do this, right? You can do it tactily, which is like touching something. So there are different, um, there's a method called, actually it's called tapping, and there are
Mhm.
7 meridian points on your body that you move through, and you literally just tap them,
Mhm.
and you go through those meridian points and you focus on the sensation of tapping those points
Mhm.
as you're moving through whatever this difficult emotion is, right? For me,
Yeah.
I like to use alternate nostril breathing, which is a yoga, it's called a pranayama, which is a breath practice. And it's just
Right.
literally alternating breathing through the different sides of your nose. So you might be in traffic, right? And you're like, oh my God, like I'm late, I got to get to work. And you have to notice that you're experiencing this irritation,
Mhm.
aggravation, whatever, and say, let me pause on this, right?
Mhm.
I recognize that I'm aggravated,
A
that
self-check.
yeah,
Mhm.
that I'm, twitching my leg, my breath is like rapid and short, and I need to take a moment. I need to expand
Mhm.
my awareness in this moment, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
go to whatever mindfulness or grounding practice is one
Mhm.
that you connect to. And actually, when we do this with our kids, we do mindfulness every day, and we
Mm.
teach them
Mhm.
a
Discipline.
mindfulness skill every single day, and they have
Mhm.
physical little toolboxes that whichever ones that
I
they
like that.
connect with, that they're like,
That's
"Oh,
cute.
this, I felt this." They can
Yeah.
write it down, the steps of how to do it, and put it in their toolbox, and then they take those with them when they graduate, so that they have this,
Aw.
they have access to this. But you get yourself a little toolbox. It could be a mental toolbox, whatever, of mindfulness techniques that work for you, that you connect with, and you find those moments, like when you're sitting in traffic, or when you burnt the toast at breakfast, or when they got your coffee order wrong, or something
Mhm.
small, right? And you start there and use those practices, and they don't have to take long, they don't have to be elaborate, but it allows you to create space between you and this event,
Mhm.
right? This triggering event. And the more that you do that, the more that you'll be able to, or the greater the event is that you'll be able to respond to in that way, right? So I'll give you
Mhm.
Mhm.
an example for
Mhm.
me that I use. with really big events that I just recently started, which I'm really actually excited about, because I started to get frustrated that these things would happen, these big national events, these big, world events, and I would
Mm-hmm.
feel really like it's nothing is enough, right? Like
Right.
no words are enough, no conversation is enough, like nothing is enough to make me feel, no Facebook status about how I'm
Mm-hmm.
praying about this is enough.
Mhm.
I don't, it's just not connecting for me. And actually, I don't know if y'all listen to Kendrick Lamar, but he just came out with a new album.
Mm-hmm.
In
Yes.
that album, he has a song where he says, essentially, like, thoughts and prayers are nice, but I hope you're actually praying for these people off the
Yes.
Right.
screen,
Mhm.
right? And I was like, damn, like that's
Mm-hmm.
really powerful, right? Because we're quick when these things happen, we're quick to go on social media and be
Mhm.
like, I'm praying for the family,
Praise.
blah, 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 blah. But how many of us are
Are
actually
actually praying.
going back and sitting in prayer or sitting and holding space
Mm-hmm.
for these energies, for these
Mm-hmm.
souls, for these spirits, right? And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I do that? How do I really do that in a way that feels impactful? So I started lighting a candle. Whenever one of these events that feels really, really big happen,
Mm-hmm.
I have this little thing that I got from Goodwill, which is like this. It's like a lantern, and
Mhm.
it fits a nice pillar candle in it. And I went to the Botanica and I got some pillar candles that fit in there, and I will put a candle in there and I will just sit for a moment. I will light it and then I just sit
Mm-hmm.
with that candle for however long I feel that I need to. And
Mm-hmm.
and I focus on that candle, or I close my eyes and I focus on the sensations in my body and try to find my breath in the midst of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get up from that, there is a transcendence. There is
Yeah.
a different energy that both I feel and that I feel like I'm giving, right?
Yeah. There's so I like to listen to high vibration music and sound. So I'll listen to that or spiritual bath music. Those things are really helpful. I know my mom and my daughter have the joke of the 40s, like they like
Yeah.
to turn up on 40.
40
So they talk about 40 frequencies and so mom, if you want to share a little bit about that, you can. But yeah, go
But you
ahead,
know
mom.
what? This is really good too, because that is when we're talking about scripturally and the spiritual disciplines and prayer and the importance of creating. Like you were talking about, Caitlin, we do these things and when these events occur, but you also inferred that you need to do these on a regular
Real
basis
basis.
so that you are already prepared and in tune. Not that you can accept them, but you're better
Mm-hmm.
able to separate yourself from the
Manage.
momentary emotion of it. Like you're going to be taken to that place, but then you're able to put yourself in a right perspective and energize yourself to be able to deal with it in a correct manner. Because we're not always able to go out and deal. And a lot of times what's happening with these individuals, they have been placed, and I'm not trying to rationalize from by no means. When I look at these individuals who create these horrendous acts, as I said, I have constantly on my news about shootings, this shooting, and this one killed the wife, and then the 10-year-old, the poor children that are watching this. The 10-year-old is the one who called and reported that the mother was killed and the grandmother was holding the infant baby and all of these things. And the only thing I can do is take myself to that place to
Mm-hmm.
relax my own self, to deal with my own little energy jar and go back
Mm-hmm.
to my own source, which is so important to know, because what you're doing is connecting to your own source. And we have to create that sense of self and understanding of who we are and that connection, as you said before it. And if you haven't done it already, we suggest that you seek out that thing that you can connect to, that toolbox that was given to the kids. And it's like that brought to mind, what do we, a lot of our children aren't privileged and haven't been privy to your courses and being able to interact with you,
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin. And a lot of times these types of things, even in a school environment, are only given to select groups of students because they're
Yeah.
the ones who are felt to be in need of it. But it's also, like you said, the 99% of adults are having these
The
same
same
issues.
issues.
So it wasn't supposed to be relegated just to this small group. It's supposed to be for each of us. And in order for us to equip our children to make them, get them in a place where they're not fearful of life. I had people call me too in tears of, what am I supposed to do? How can I deal with this thing? This is so God awful. If there's a God, how does he allow this? I know he can do this and I know he can do that. But it takes me being able to recognize some things about myself and my own inabilities, my own traditional ways of coping, or I think it's coping, but in my
Right.
coping, I'm not coping very well with it, and my adjustment techniques are not appropriate, and I begin to sense them when I'm getting these levels of emotional discomfort. I can't sleep. My eating has been interrupted. I'm
Mm-hmm.
tearful, and why am I feeling like everything in the world is wrong and against me? And God, where are you? That I need to recognize these things about myself. And as you said, not to try to justify it. I mean, I know I tell myself in a way of justification that, God, I know that you're a God and that this is a fallen and imperfect world, and I cannot expect perfection from imperfection. And
Mm.
so I have to help me to deal with this thing. And so I too have to imagine, go to that place, create that place. That's what we're doing when we create those
Mm-hmm.
sanctuary places that we go
The
to.
throne room.
40
Mm-hmm.
hertz, get our
Mm-hmm.
40s and with our candles and our aromatherapy and those quiet spaces of light spaces where it's all quiet and tranquil, the flowers. We have to create those spaces intentionally. They don't
Yeah.
happen by accident. It's because we have been realistic about ourselves as humans, and knowing that we don't have the capacity to be able to instantly equip ourselves with the even health announcements and pronouncements about things that are in our health condition. How am I going to endure these things? That there is a process and mind work that needs to be done on an ongoing basis, like you said, Caitlin, not just when the incident occurs, but on an ongoing basis to equip us with a toolbox that we can go in and pull out. I need this right now. I need that right now. And it also involves, as you also stated, having a community
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
of
Mm-hmm.
supports.
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think that one thing that I want to note here is that this creation of this space also requires us to be aware of what what's going on in and through us and around us, right? Because one thing that might work for me might not work for you. And
Mhm.
as Caitlin talked about the sensory things that we can do as we touch and we utilize our senses to be able to kind of get ourselves back to this place of balance. Just know that sometimes certain touches don't feel good, and you have to know what that is. If it's a touch, and that you're touching here and it makes you anxious or it makes your heart jump, the thing is, and Caitlin, maybe there's something that they can do, and I'm always going to refer back to you because I'm going to consider you the SME
Yes,
in
the
the room.
expert,
I'm going to take
the
myself out
resident
of that
expert.
space. Yes. So I'm going to I might know the answer, but I'm going to refer it back to you. But so when people do acknowledge that, hey, this touch is making me uncomfortable or something, is that something wrong? Does it mean that there's something wrong with them or that they need to uncover something necessarily? Or do they make space for that feeling and figure out what the feeling is that they do that does make them feel good?
So I would say in the instance where you are trying to, where your goal is to regulate your nervous system, right? Anything that is acting in the opposite way of that, that is somehow um, activating your nervous system, we want to steer away from, right?
Mhm.
There's not necessarily um, a reason why a particular thing would. I
Mhm.
mean, there is a reason, right? But we
Mhm.
may not know it, right? We may not
Mhm.
know because our nervous systems respond to different things, whether they're historical, whether they're from our own experiences. We're not always aware of them. Our body knows, right? But our
Because it keeps
mind
the
doesn't.
score.
Right, exactly. Yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
So our body knows these things. And sometimes, and I think that we as intellectual beings, right,
Mhm.
we have this tendency to want to know intellectually everything, right? We
Mm.
want to understand everything intellectually. And we create this separation between our mind and our body. And that is
Mhm.
where a huge amount of dysfunction, disease, illness, distress comes from, is because
Mhm.
we have created this sense of distinction between our mind and our body, when truly our body, and even so specifically our gut, I don't know if anyone has ever heard this before, but our gut is our second brain,
Mhm.
right? A
Gut
lot
health.
of enzymes and bacteria that happen in our gut are they trigger lots of other things, right? And one surefire way to tell if your nervous system is dysregulated or something is going on with you is how your stomach is, right? If you are chronically
Mhm.
having stomach issues, or all of a sudden you're having stomach issues, there is a high likelihood that something is going on with you energetically, right?
Mm.
And so it's really important, like you said, for us to pay attention to what is going on with our bodies and how our
Mhm.
bodies respond to certain things, right?
Right.
So if you're trying to regulate your nervous system and you saw on YouTube to tap your forehead like this, and that's making you anxious, like, don't
Right.
do that, dog.
Don't do
Don't
it.
do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to be like, this one's not for me.
That's
Um,
right.
Right.
Try
and
something
find
else.
something else, right? Because it's all you, right? Like, this is all about coming back to
Mhm.
self. All of this is
Self-care,
back to self.
self-awareness. Yes.
And so if
Self-love.
you're finding that something is not working for self, then that is not the thing for you, right? And that may be not the thing for you in this particular moment. 20 years from now,
Ah,
might
yes.
be the thing for you, right? But where we're at in our journeys, in our healing journeys, in our regulation journeys, is going to dictate what kinds of things our body responds to, what kinds of things our bodies can tolerate. So
Mm.
there's actually a really interesting article about yoga for um, survivors of sexual trauma, and how
Mhm.
yoga can, which is known as something that is nervous system regulating, right, can
Right.
actually be extremely triggering
That's
for
right. Certain moves.
survivors, yep, of sexual trauma, because of certain
Hmm.
positions, certain ways of holding
Yes.
your body that
Hmm.
our body recognizes as dangerous,
It
right? As
connects it
Mm.
to, yes.
exactly. And so when you notice that your body's responding in that way, that's just an indication that this is not the time or space for you to engage in that particular practice and to try to
Right.
explore something different.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one thing I'm gonna throw out here is these are all techniques that should help us be able to protect our peace. So we hear people talk about, oh, I need peace. I'm maintaining my peace, but we often don't talk about what it means to protect our peace. And these are ways in which we can protect our peace, and be able to stay true to ourselves. And so we want to thank you, Caitlin, because I see the time here and I want to be respectful of it. Calvin, we're going to give you a shout out and say thank you for such a wonderful feedback that this is the right conversation for this time. Thank you for giving me coping strategies. I will be more conscious of my emotional space. If that is how you're leaving feeling here today, we've
That's the goal.
accomplished the goal, right? I really just want to say thank you to all of our listeners, and I want to say an extra thank you to Caitlin for her, just opening up her schedule and her time to us today so that we can give this space to you guys to have a breath.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope to be back again at some point. This is
Yes,
wonderful.
Absolutely.
yes, yes. So before we leave out, I want everyone who's listening, while you're listening, I don't care where you are, I just want you to take at least 3 seconds out and I want you to take at least 3 breaths and say, it's gonna be all right. Everything's gonna be all right. Everything is going to be all right, guys. We will see you next week back in the throne room, this place that we have created just for you to be able to purge from your issues, heal from your wounds, and find rest so that you can transform into that which you have been called and created to become. Remember, you are royalty. See you guys all next week. Bye bye.